Well, welcome everyone to We Are Triathletes webinar series. This is Hillary Topper of We Are Triathletes and a Triathlete's Diary. And I'm really excited because I have Pete Magill with me. He is the author, I'm going to show you the book. He is the author of Speed Runner. And I'm so psyched to hear about how to learn to run faster. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Pete.
Hello, good to see everybody, and really happy to be here to talk about how to run faster, also how to run more efficiently, how to work training for running into your overall training, what things to stress, and also why it's important to be able to run faster, especially if you're thinking, I don't do a whole lot of sprinting out there in the middle of a triathlon. Why do I care about leg speed? And one of the reasons I always tell endurance athletes they should care about leg speed is if you aren't training for leg speed, if you aren't developing leg speed, then you are getting beaten by an athlete who is training for leg speed and developing leg speed. It's been, I've got 2 other books out, Born Again Runner and Build Your Running Body, and I've got another book coming out on training for the 5K. And a huge part of all of them is the development of speed. It's not just me talking. For many, many years, we've known that the very top distance runners in any race, they looked at Olympic champions going back as far as they could. A guy named, I don't know if you've read Timothy Noakes' Lore of Running, but Timothy Noakes talks about testing out Olympic athletes and finding that the fastest runners in Olympic races for distance were also the fastest runners from 100 meters to 400 meters. And the big question would be, why is that important? Don't we leave all those sprint types behind by the time we get to the finish line? And the answer is no, you don't. Yes, a great sprinter is not going to have the same makeup to get them to within smelling distance of the finish line as a great endurance runner. But once endurance athletes once we've all made it toward that final stretch, it's the guy with the fastest leg speed who's going to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let me ask you, Pete, so just so that everybody knows, can you give us a little bit about your backgrounds? I mean, we know that you're the creator of Speed Runner, and you are, that you're the author of a couple of books, but just give us a little background on you.
Well, I'm my own athletics. I'm best known for my competitive years as a masters athlete. Basically, that's because I spent a lot of my mid-20s to late 30s in the nightclub business and in Hollywood screenwriting, and led what might be considered a pretty unhealthy lifestyle. I decided to get it together in about the time I turned 39. Got in the masters just as a way to regain my health more than anything. And ended up having the time of my life. As a masters athlete, I'm 5 times United States cross-country, masters cross-country runner of the year. I hold American age group records for the 5K for 45 to 49, 50 to 54, 55 to 59. I'm the fastest ever American age 50 and over for both 5K at 15:01, 10K 31:11. Second fastest at the half marathon, 1:10:19. As a coach, I've led my cross country and road racing teams to over 24 national championships. So I've been involved in this sport, and I've personally won 6 overall national masters cross country championships. And so I know a lot about the endurance training and the endurance competition that is relevant to your experiences in the triathlon. cross country is much more like training for a half marathon than it is like training for a 10K, which is in fact the length of most of the races. And, you know, it's just been because running gave me my life back, because it pulled me out of the my age 30s spiral into declining health to the point that a ER doctor once suggested I wasn't going to live to see my then 6-year-old son graduate from high school. Because it gave me so much back, I've spent the last decade trying to give back to the sport. That's where these books come from. And Speed Runner, I figured I'd covered most of endurance training and Build Your Running Body, and then the Born Again Runner, which is a training book for beginning and returning runners. And I thought it was time to get down to the crux of the matter, and that's what happens when our feet hit the ground. Because as runners, when you're running in a triathlon, when you're developing your stride, what really matters in running is what happens when your foot hits the ground. When both feet are in the air, you're slowing down, okay? When both your feet are in the air, you're fighting against, you know, whatever air resistance there is, whatever drag there is. Gravity wants to pull you back down to the ground. There's nothing you can do but slow down when you're in the air. And here's a really interesting thing that most runners don't know. There are two things that happen in a run. One, your foot is on the ground. Two, your foot is in the air. Okay, the amount of time it takes Usain Bolt, the best sprinter in the history of the world, to turn his legs over in the air while he's running is a little over 0.3 of a second. Okay, you know what it takes the slowest runner in your local 5K to turn their legs over in the air? A little over 0.3 of a second. We all turn our legs over. We all reposition our legs to get ready for the next step in almost exactly the same amount of time. The difference between one runner and the next is what they do when their foot is on the ground. The faster you can put force into the ground, the faster you can get off the ground. The whole purpose of when we land on the ground is to put force into the ground so that it will, you know, according to the laws of physics, for every reaction there is an equal and opposite reaction. So the force will then propel us off the ground. Okay, if you take your time doing that, if you leave your foot on the ground, you're going to be slower getting back off the ground. So the whole idea behind Speed Runner, behind the training that we're in, or that's involved in the book, is how do we get that force into the ground so that we can get off the ground faster.
Wow. So well, I have now a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
From that. Number one, do you believe in having a power meter?
No. A power meter is fantastic for biking. A power meter is an incredible tool, you know, for biking because the power is pretty well established. With running, it's different. It's, you know, they just did a really interesting study on this, and I wish I could cite it because I just read it, but I don't have it in front of me and I didn't print it up. But they wanted to take a look at how power meters actually related to running when you were running flat, when you were running uphill, when you were running downhill, when you were picking up your stride rate, when you were lowering your stride rate. And what they found was that it was not equivalent to what they could measure using things like running economy, the speed, the actual force being put into the ground, that it did not, they used an algorithm to try to even out what the power would be, but they weren't actually getting legitimate power readings. So that it was where you might be claiming your power was that you were using less power, that where you should have been using less energy, you were actually using more energy on things like going downhill. They just aren't ready for runners yet. It's one of those things that's wonderful for bikers. It's just not ready for running.
So, okay, so what you were saying before is that slower runners and faster runners strike the ground at the same time. Is that what I'm hearing?
They turn their legs over in the air to reposition for the next strike in the same amount. They're capable of it. It doesn't mean everybody's going to do it. We've all seen the person who lopes along between. What I'm saying, if they tried to turn their legs over fast, they would turn it over at the same rate. That what makes the difference is what you do when your foot is on the ground.
Now, do you think that it really is possible for somebody to get faster? I mean, a slower runner, maybe a 12, 13-minute mile runner, to really achieve that, 9, 10-minute mile?
Well, I don't know if a 13-minute miler is going to achieve a 9-minute mile. I think part of what we have to do as coaches is, and as writers, is be realistic with our audience. One of the first things I always tell them is, if you're a 13-minute miler, don't start looking for a 9-minute mile. If you're a 25-minute 5K runner, don't start thinking about that 15-minute 5K. Think about getting better, and then wait to see how much better you can get. Yes, you can get better. You can always get better. If you aren't developing, if you aren't delivering the force you need, and it's not just force, you have to deliver a certain amount of force to get off the ground, okay? Anyone who's run, and next time you're out for a run, think about this. Let's say you're running along, and you're running along the road, and you have to get up on a curb, okay? Think about, just follow what you're doing with your steps for a minute. You'll feel the steps hitting, and right before you get up on the curb, you'll notice that your foot stays on the ground longer. And it's very noticeable. Well, why does your foot stay on the ground longer when you have to get up on the curb? It stays on the ground longer because you have to develop more force. You have to put more force into the ground so that you can push yourself up onto the curb. Well, if you're untrained, you're spending that more time on the ground to produce that force every stride. Every single stride you're taking versus perhaps somebody like myself who trains for speed and force production all the time, you're always spending more time on the ground to develop that force. Where I'm developing a stride where I hit the ground hard enough to create that force in half the time it takes you to create that force. Let's go back to Usain Bolt. It takes Usain Bolt about 0.03 of a second to produce enough force to get back off the ground, okay? That isn't a whole lot of time because he will spend about 0.7 of a second, he will spend less than 1/10 of a second on the ground. Okay, he will spend about 0.77 of a second on the ground, but he's developing that force so quickly, okay? Where you and I, or a regular distance runner, might take 3 times as long to develop that force. So we're stuck on the ground. We're stuck on the ground while he has hit it. He's not only hit it faster, but he's put more force into the ground, so his stride is longer. While we're drifting along at, 1.5 meters while we're spinning our legs, he's going 3 meters while his legs are spinning. Okay, so once again, yes, it can be trained, but you have to actually develop the force capability. In running, we've long had this fear, and I know we've sold shoes on it, we sold riders on it, this fear that the force, the impact force when we hit the ground is going to lead to injury. Okay, so everybody's afraid of impact force. They've never actually tied it to injury, but it seems to make sense. A runner hits, their impact force spikes, that's when you're going to get injured. Okay, but the truth is that the force you build doesn't peak when your foot hits the ground. It peaks when your foot is basically right under your body. Okay, because that's when you develop the amount of force. You can be afraid of force all you want, but you still have to develop that force to get off the ground. So don't be afraid of it. You have to develop it.
Okay, so this whole thing with force, is this, can you talk to us a little bit about your speedrunner system? Is that the crux of the system?
The speedrunner system is developed for people for all sports, but there's parts of it that are relevant to endurance runners. I don't expect endurance athletes to get out there with a weight sled and lean over at a 45-degree angle and push the weight sled as hard as they can for about 30 meters. That's not going to do any good. It's especially not going to do any good for athletes who have an enormous training load over the course of the week and can't fit something like that in. So the question is, what can an endurance athlete do to create more of this force? Okay, I'm a big believer in two things for that. A, resistance training. I don't mean getting into the gym and building your body, you know, like Mr. Universe or anything like that. But resistance training is not only necessary for injury prevention. Not only do you want to get in there and do your squats and your step ups and your step downs and your Nordic curls and your single leg deadlifts for injury prevention, but it's a way to teach your nervous system to recruit more of the available muscle in your legs than you would recruit out on a distance run. When you're on a distance run, you're recruiting about 70 to 85% of your slow twitch muscle fiber. Okay, slow twitch muscle fiber is great, but you need to develop intermediate fiber and even some fast twitch fiber in order to really have good force capability. Okay, when you get in resistance training and you put not a heavy weight, but a challenging weight that you can do like 8 to 10 reps with, you're recruiting all of that muscle fiber. Okay, your nervous system is learning to recruit it and use it. You know, if there's one thing that speedrunner is about, and which I'm about as a runner, okay, this is my endurance training philosophy too. I think the nervous system is at the heart of success as an athlete. So when you're resistance training, you're teaching your nervous system to control the muscles that then you are going to use to create force when you're out running. You know, I got to tell you, if you've ever trained and you suddenly are in great shape, and I knew this feeling long before I knew why it was happening. When you get in great shape and you're out running and it suddenly feels like your knees are just popping on their own, like you're not even thinking your way through your stride anymore. You're just getting this nice turnover, just like boop, 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 and you're like, what happened? Oh my God, what happened? Well, that's your nervous system learning how to do this stuff without you getting in the way with your clunky little conscious, you know, commands to it. It has learned how to use your legs better. So A, resistance training, B, drills. I really am a huge practitioner of drills. I've been doing them since I was age 21 and used to sneak into the Nike Athletics West training sessions up in Eugene, Oregon, where I lived, to learn how the big boys were doing it. Jack Daniels was with Nike's Athletics West then, and they were doing these weird things where they were skipping and bounding and springing and doing all kinds of things that would get you really weird looks in the parks back in those days. And I started doing them, and they, as a master's athlete, I would say are the most important workout I do. So that's what endurance runners can do. They can do resistance training, they can do drills, and then if they really, really want to put it all together, they can get out and sprint up some hills. Hill sprints are, you know, another exercise I've been doing since my 20s. So for 30 years, it's been part of my regimen. And when I talk about sprinting up a hill, I talk about sprinting like 8 to 10 seconds up a hill. There is nothing that recruits more muscle fiber more quickly into a legitimate running form so that your nervous system is having to recruit it the way you'll use in a race than a hill sprint. So get out there, 8 to 10 second hill sprints. I'm going to tell you, here's one of the worst kept secrets in running. All the top marathoners in the world do hill sprints.
Awesome. So let's go back to this for a moment. Resistance training and drills. Are there any specific ones that you would recommend? I know you have a ton of them in the book, which,
yes,
you know, but is there one or two that you could just recommend to the group?
Well, I'm going to tell you because technique drills are a little difficult to do. So one of the easy things to do are the skipping drills, okay? Because all you have to know is skip, just like schoolyard skipping, okay? That's kind of your warm-up drill. Then skip high, okay? First skip, then skip high, then skip long, okay? So there's 3 drills right off the bat. Now I'm going to tell you the other important thing about drills. One of the criticisms of drills is that they don't actually mimic the exact nervous system control of your stride that you use when you're running. And this is a legitimate criticism because it doesn't. At the same time, it's strengthening things that you will use during the stride. But here's how you overcome that complaint. You do a drill, you jog back to where you started the drill, and then you do a stride. So that the things that you are training, the things you are strengthening, the parts of your stride you're overemphasizing are then being worked into your actual stride. Again, the important thing is to make sure your nervous system is learning how to use all those muscles to produce more force and to produce it more quickly.
Another question I have for you is, how many days a week would you say, and what should those days look like, would you say that you need in order to run faster?
Well, the answer is different if I'm talking to a 5K training group or if I'm talking to a triathlon training group. I'm a coach with the California Triathlon Club, and how they train is far different from how my Cal Coast Masters cross-country team trains. So for triathletes, you have a different thing. It depends how many days you're training to begin with. You have different sports, and you got to train for the different sports. The rule of specificity demands that you train in the exact way that you're going to race. So for a triathlete, you have to ask, what is the important part of running I'm going to train? You're going to have some distance running, because distance running is the foundation for everything else we do. It takes a lot longer than everything else. It's, you know, the Colorado River carving out the Grand Canyon. And you just have to kind of sit back and understand it's going to take eons for it to pay off tremendously. But in the meantime, you need 2 days a week to get fast. You need 1 day to do the things we're talking about here. Do the drills or the sprints or whatever. Here's the thing. That doesn't have to be its own day without anything else. You know, I just run now, and I don't have time to just set aside a drills day, you know? So I'll do 1 set of each drill, and for me, I do 10 different drills. Okay, so I'll do 1 set of each drill, and then I'll go out and I'll do a workout afterwards. I'll do a repetition workout on the road, or I'll do hill repeats or something like that. So you need 1 day where you're doing some sort of repetition. As a triathlete, you're probably more interested in tempo-paced training and mixed with VO2 max, where you're probably alternating tempo 1 week with VO2 max work, which would just be probably like 5K paced work the next week for repetitions. I always suggest 5K pace for that, because you got to go at least 90% of VO2 max to improve VO2 max, and 5K pace is about 95% VO2 max for most people. 10K pace can slide and be a little bit under. So if you mix tempo one week, VO2 max work the next week, and then on another day of the week, you have drills or resistance training, or drills plus hill sprints, or drills plus some hill repeats. I'm also big on actual hill repeats, not the hill sprints, but hill repeats of 30 to 90 seconds. If you do those for 2 days, you're going to get a lot of bang for your buck. But again, that's assuming you have 3 days of running training, so that you can get in a distance run too, because the rest of it should be all distance. Any spare time you have after those 2 days of workouts, make it distance.
Cool. That's cool. Right now, I'm going to open it up to the group, see if anybody has any questions before we end.
If there aren't, I can always come up with more.
I have one more question. A lot of the members do Galloway. How can this method be incorporated into that method?
Well, by Galloway, do you mean the
Run.
walk running? Okay, one of the things that I do, which absolutely drives my club mates crazy, and which gets me rolls of the eyes from people I know, is I start every training set when I've taken time off or taken downtime. I start by walk jogging for about 3 weeks, and everybody thinks, but you've got 5 cross country runner of the year awards. What are you doing walking and jogging? And I say, well, because it's a great way to start building up. When you start building, you've got to build connective tissue strength just as much as you have to build muscle strength, and it's better to walk jog. Here's the thing, there are no shortcuts, okay? So walk jogging will build a certain amount of strength, but you will not build the strength you get with, I say, the hill sprints or the drills or whatever. I would suggest somebody who is walk jogging start doing resistance training before they decide to move on to the drills or hill sprints or even hill repeats. The resistance training will give you the base. It will strengthen all the muscles you're going to use before you put them through the more intense training involved in the speed runner program or any of the other programs I've suggested in my other books. You really need to get that strength first, because the best way to become a good runner is to be able to get out every day and keep running. If you overdo it and you get injured, I always talk about injury prevention routines, and resistance training is a big part of that. And I always tell people, the problem with injury prevention routines is they don't double as injury reversal routines. So that's what I would tell your Galloway trainers is have patience, spend about 3 weeks of resistance training, okay? And I'm just talking about the basic exercises I talked about, and then go and do some drills.
Well, I think Pete's book is really worth checking out. So it is from Philo Press, and I would definitely recommend it. He's got some great, I'm going to just show you some pictures that he has in the book. There's lots and lots of drills and pictures and even training programs that he provides. So thank you very much, Pete. Why don't you give everybody your information, so in case anybody wants to contact you directly?
It's easy. They can just go to PeteMagill.com and you'll find contact information. Again, like I said, I think Speed Runner is a great book for doing the drills. It's got a lot of the resistance training. It's got a lot of the drills. These drills they should be part of your program. If the drills aren't part of your program, again, you're getting beaten by somebody who is using these drills. They've been, like I said, I picked them up from Nike's top athletic team back when Salazar was running with them, and all the group for 37 years ago. These are not, you know, the flavor of the month. This is something which has been a part of endurance athletes training for decades. And if you aren't on the boat already, it's time to get on it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pete. Really appreciate your time. And thank you guys for joining us. That's about it. So thanks again.
All right.